Torey Lovullo said last week to his Diamondbacks, I want you to be vulnerable. Did you read this in the sports section? A couple of weeks ago. Anyhow, be vulnerable. So now his ball players are saying it to each other. Be vulnerable. What does he mean? It means you want to open yourself up. If you're an old-timer and a vet, you know, there are lots of new people on the team. Share with them what it is you know, not only from your strengths, but your frailties and your fear. Allow yourself to be open so that others can be open with you. We need to learn that too, especially those of us who are saddled with the responsibility for taking care of others. Because we don't take care of ourselves in quite the same way. If you're going to be able to survive in this business in which the rates of substance abuse and suicide are multiple times the national average, and Barbara tells me if you die and on your death certificate it says that you've been employed as an EMT, that you are 39% more likely to commit suicide than the general population. Do not let your truth eat you apart. The way to deal with what it is you face is to allow yourself to be open with each other, to come to a conference like this or in a support group in which somehow your vulnerability is not held against you. Because if you don't do it, it's going to eat you apart. And your heart will know it and break you down psychoneuroimmunologically. Even if your head says, do it, you can't talk about it, it's going to be held against me, people will see me as weak. Your heart is going to break you down. What you feel is going to neurohormonally make you vulnerable to getting sick. So how are you going to deal with it? How are you going to deal with it? Number one, nobody makes it alone. Nobody makes it alone. You know, this myth, do your own thing, you're all you got, you're number one, paddle your own canoe, you're familiar with this rhetoric. Bullshit. Nobody is always number one. Nobody is always doing their own thing. Nobody is always paddling their own canoe. Sometimes you are weak, you are afraid, you're sick, you don't want to paddle your canoe. You want to give your paddle to somebody else. But there are so few objects of credibility in our culture that we trust to give our paddle to that we're reluctant to give it up, not knowing they're going to take us to some place we want to go. Every institution that we once believed in, from the government to the judiciary to the police department, even the Supreme Court, certainly businesses, big five accounting firms, I don't want to go on and on, but you get the idea. If you don't trust something other than yourself, you're going to get stuck. Nobody makes it alone. So you got to get connected to something you do believe in. This is not a plea for ecclesiasticism. I don't care what you believe in. Old growth forests, the animals in the woods, the air, the land that's been given to you by your ancestors for the last 1,000 years. But it's got to be something other than you that's going to be there, like your families, who are going to be there and stand behind you. You want to be there for them too. Take better care of yourself so you can take care of them. Be there for them in the same ways they are there for you. I want you to restore the dinner meal to a family ritual. When you're not working, I don't want you to come home. But when you're not working, I want you to sit down with the family without any electronic devices and talk to each other. Tell each other some stories about who you are, what you do, including your frailties and how difficult it is. Share the truth of who it is you are, not some imagined figure of who it is that you had to be. We used to think that somehow if you were connected to something other than yourself, maybe you weren't functioning at optimal self-sufficiency, right? That you were not doing your own thing. That you were dependent. You had dependent needs. I want to tell you, we all have dependent needs, right? As a species, we were meant to be connected to something other than ourselves. It's why we have belly buttons, which serve no useful physiologic function other than to remind us that we were once connected to somebody else. Look at it every day. I look at my belly button every day because I take a shower every day, because I hear my mother whispering in my ear, be clean, you could get run over by a bus. They'll take you to the emergency room. A first responder is going to see you, and the first thing they're going to look at is your underwear and say, oh my God, you know, what kind of a family does he come from? Nobody makes it alone. We are connected. Find something to connect to. And look at them as relatives. That's what they say in Indian country. Everything you can have a relationship with, even stones. Come into that sweat lodge. You pour water on them, and the steam is seen as the breath of your ancestors. That's a whole other ceremonial sense than walking into a steam room, you know what I mean? Everything is filled with spirit, with aliveness. Connect with those things. If you are connected, it doesn't mean that you are dependent or suffering from dependency, or worse, the dread disease of codependency. Best definition of codependency I ever heard is a codependent is somebody who, on their deathbed, sees somebody else's life flash in front of them. Find something to connect to. It's going to sustain you in the hard times. With everything, be as with relatives. If you allow yourself the privilege of your truth, you're going to be able to share it not just with your family, but each other. If you share your vulnerability, as Tori Lavallo says, if you reveal those pieces of yourself that are not always sure, it allows somebody else to somehow share it as well. You need to depend on each other. And for many of you, depending on each other exceeds your dependence on your family. You are the people you trust the most in the world. Somebody's got your back all the time. Of course, there's some intra-organizational competitiveness, and sometimes we get a little bit divided, but the people you work with, you got to be open with them as well. And if you're feeling in any way other than wonderful, it doesn't mean that you're suffering from a disease. You want to be able to share your truth so that you can find your strength. Find your strength, and the strength you have to find is the strength within. Get your head, heart, and lips together. The natives of the Iroquois Confederacy say that this place is called Turtle Island. A turtle is a powerful totemic object, but a wonderful symbol for health. If the turtle is threatened, it goes inside. It seeks strength within. That's the strength you need to seek when you're feeling something other than wonderful. But you can't stay inside. The only way the turtle moves is by sticking out its neck. This formidably armored creature, when it's threatened, goes within. But the only way it moves is by sticking out its neck. And you got to take the risk to stick out your neck when things are not going well, when you're feeling something other than terrific in every moment. It's not a disease. It's a sign only of our humanity, our ability to be vulnerable and to recognize it. Tell yourself the truth, and then take some steps to address it. Talk about it. Deal with it. Acknowledge your truth instead of being like a pit bull and hanging on. Even if you are dying, you got to let go of that which no longer serves you, of that which is breaking you down. And you got to know when that's time. That's what resilience is all about. Not the make-believe, but the recognition that whatever it is you come to, if you come to it in truth, you're going to deal with it better. Nobody makes it alone. Nobody makes it alone. I want to tell you before closing, because I forgot to bring that little sheet and the handout that I wanted to bring you. You know, I am just forgetting more. It doesn't stop me from flapping faster than goose droppings through a slide trombone, but I did forget the paper. If you're interested in exploring how to open your heart and get in touch with how you sustain that, get in touch with us at the Healing Core. The Healing Core, core spelled C-O-R-P-S, and we do some workshops, especially for healthcare providers, about how you sustain that healing heart. And get in touch with us, leave us your email, and somebody will get back in touch with you. My continuing legacy in this world. What time is it?
You want to take some questions?
No. Yes, but I just wondered how long I've been flapping. 35 minutes?
17.
Anyhow, I wanted to save some time. For me, the most exciting part of being with you is to have a chance for us to talk to each other. So I've reached down inside and shared some things about me. What kind of questions or statements, what do you want to know that I may not have addressed? And I'll tell you my truth. Alison will hand the microphone around. If you have a question, please say it loudly. I also forgot my hearing aids. Anybody? There's somebody in the back.
Hello. Hi.
Ah.
Loved your talk. Thank you so much for coming today. What do you feel is the thing that keeps us from connecting the three things that you talked about, the body, the mind, and the spirit together? What do you think is preventing most of us? Is it ego?
Did you all hear that? It's because, you know, we suffer from what I call primacy of the head. We deny those aspects of ourselves. They get a subordinate status. If you can't prove it, then somehow I won't believe it. We don't trust the heart because somehow it seems soft. It's the intuitive part of ourselves. We're not sure that somehow if we allow it to merge, that somehow it's going to be like, it's going to leave us off better for the experience, right? And most of us, I mean, as a species, we always want to know more than is available to us. It's an unfortunate concomitant of our humanity. So there are always more reasons not to take steps to acknowledge the heart than there are reasons to pay attention to it. If you're looking for reasons to maintain the status quo, for doing the same old stuff in the same old way, there are always more reasons to hang on than to let go. There are always more reasons to choose not to be vulnerable for all the things we talked about. Human beings can hang on forever. A pit bull will take a fighting boar by the throat and be gored and bleeding to death. It will not let go. It's too big a price for us to pay. You don't have to bleed to death. You don't have to be drinking, using drugs, getting angry, have your vulnerability as a sign of your incompetence or weakness. So we tend to turn off this aspect of ourselves. And what I'm telling you is, if you're not sure what the truth is, listen to this. Listen to this. The heart knows things the mind doesn't want to consider, right? It just hasn't been crippled with self-doubt and fear. Pay attention to what it is you feel, because it's closer to your truth when dealing with these issues I'm talking to you about. How are you going to stay well? How are you going to be resilient in a profession that demands from you an extraordinary sacrifice? Anybody else? And somebody in the back as well.
So, just following up on your last point, you said that field, right? So
Okay, I can't, you'll have to use the microphone, I'm sorry.
just following up on your last point
Thank
that you
you.
just made. You said to feel, to try to heal, correct?
Yes.
What if somebody is in a suicidal state and they are, would you say that they are feeling too much as you're trying to bring them back towards more of an intellectual thinking about things? My question really is, how do we address the suicide risk with people who we perceive as feeling too much?
Well, you can't feel too much. How do you express your feelings is the critical question. How do you express the feelings? The feelings are just feelings. You can't tell somebody, don't feel. My mother used to say that, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. You'd stub your toe, I'd hurt, I'd bruise myself, it doesn't hurt. I mean, for her, you know, hurt means that somebody's going to take your life. And I thought, unless I was hurting and bleeding to death, you didn't complain. Feelings are just feelings. They have no color. We can all feel the same things. We are all human. We haven't changed our feeling responses since our Cro-Magnon ancestors. How are you going to deal with what you feel? Not whether or not you should feel it. Feeling too much is not why we commit suicide. It's our fear of confronting what we know to be our truth that we cannot accept. So we have to find ways to mask, disguise, or run away from it. The issue is you don't have to wait that long. You know if you're not feeling well because it's going to come out in some funky ways. You get short with your wife, with your kids. You will hold them to a different standard than you do your patients for whom you are there in a non-judgmental way. Find a way to express them rather than act them out. And I think we need to make that easier in the profession. That acknowledging it doesn't mean that you are some kind of incompetent, weak wimp, but rather that you are human. And in sharing our humanity, it reminds us that we are all in this together. I knew an old Indian dude. See, this is what happens if you don't ask me a question. I will ramble with a story. I am with my family in Belize in the jungles, and we're taken around to the ruins in Guatemala by a native Mayan. And I happen to ask him, are there any traditional healers left? And he says, it just so happens that the last Mayan healer in this part of the country happens to be my uncle, who happens to live in a village that happens to be on the way back to your hotel. You want to pay attention to those things. Every act of insight, of creativity, is simply the result of a prepared mind and being in the right place at the right time. Serendipity. It opens the window to discovery. Your mind is prepared, you're in the right surrounding at the right time, so we stop in the village. I see this old guy outside his hut, in which there are people from all over the country waiting. Donaliho Ponte was his name. And I am standing there with, an interesting assortment of native people, mestizos, Mennonites who came from Canada through the United States into Central America, blonde, freckle-faced, speaking German. An entire ensemble of people. So I wait for my turn, and I go inside and talk to him. But there are a lot of sick people out there, so I want to hurry up and ask him my question, because I can still hear my mother whispering in my ear. You're not sick, there are other people who are sick, hurry up, you don't want to take his time, this is just not about you, there are other people who are needier than you. So I ask him my critical question, which is, what's the most important thing you've learned about healing that allows you to heal people? And he says to me, the most important thing about healing people is not to drink cold water on an empty stomach on a hot day. You know, this is like the dancing story, you know, some kind of mystical quality. And I look at him and I say, "Excuse me?" And he says, "Yeah, most important thing that I know that allows me to heal people is not to take a cold drink on an empty stomach on a hot day." And I ask him in my rudimentary Spanish, "¿Por qué? Why is that?" And he says, "Because it gives you bad belly." I still don't get it. I say, "Bad belly? Bad belly?" He said, "Yeah. You can't come to people with bad belly. We come to people with good head and no belly at all. We call this dispassionate clinical objectivity. Don't get too involved. Share your expertise, but don't get too connected because it will affect you personally in ways you can't escape. I'm telling you, you have to come to your work with good belly. And you know when your belly is not good. Pay attention to it. It will affect the quality of your work. And it will save your life. It'll save your life. Is my time up? Do we have time for...
Is there any more questions?
All right, so this is more for me because I can't move on without you finishing the story of you going to Germany.
A little louder, please.
You went to Germany,
I did.
right? And if the Jews could just juggle this way,
Yeah.
and you really never finished your story
I
on
didn't.
on
Thank
how you
you.
overcame anger, and I can't move on for the rest of the day until I hear this story.
Thank you. I
So I
actually
apologize.
forgot to tell you the end of that story. I wanted to scream out, is why I left the story out, and I didn't do it. I was afraid. So I waited until it was all over, and my wife comes out of the museum hall and stands next to me and says, what's wrong with you? And I tried to get it together. I said, "Nothing wrong with me." I tried to hide. My wife, you know, we'd been married for 30 years by then. And she says, "You don't look good. You are ashen." And I tell him what this guy said. And Juden is all fucking it. If Jews had learned how to juggle this way, I said, "I have to speak to him." And she says, "Well, why don't you?" So I wait till it's over. And he passes the hat around, people drop some money. I go up to him and I say, "I'm an American." He says, "Welcome." And then I say in German, my mother tongue, "Ich bin Jude." I happen to be Jewish. He says, "It's a very sad part of our history." And I say, "Bullshit." Not so easy to say in German. If it's such a sad part of your history, how could you have said what you said? And he looks at me incredulously, wide-eyed, and says, "What did I say?" I said, "Don't give me that. You know what you said." And he said, "No. What did I say?" So I tell him, "You said, wenn Juden es so gefangen hätten," and then he smiles at me and he says, "Ich habe nicht Juden gesagt." I didn't say Juden. I didn't say Jews. Ich habe Newton gesagt. I'm standing about 20 feet away from him. My hearing is not terrific anyway. He said Newton. I heard Newton. He said Newton. If Newton had learned how to juggle this way, Isaac Newton, if he had learned how to juggle this way, the whole history of civilization would be different. He would not have discovered the laws of gravity. He said Newton. I heard Newton. I heard what I wanted to hear. Most of us only want to hear what we already know, so we can continue to do what we've always done. And then we hang around with other people who do it the same way we do it, which convinces us the way we're doing it is the only way it is. You got to let go of that. You got to look again at everything you know. If you don't, then your destiny just becomes a repetition of your history. Where you're going is just where you've been. This is not a heroic journey. Journey of heroes is to learn something from the experience, to look again at what you know, and to move beyond your limitations and become the hero of your own journey. and to your family and to your children and to the essence of your soul so you can continue to do good work. I wish you well. I honor the work you do. I'm delighted to have been able to talk to you. Keep in touch with the Healing Corps. Thank you very much.